Welcome to Fight News Now Extra. I'm your host, John Pollock, and we're discussing the top news items in mixed martial arts today with John Ramdine and Robin Black. We will be discussing Paul Daley holding out hope that he will one day return to the UFC. It's Camp Wars as Novo Uniao and Team Alpha Male will meet again this summer, and another big grudge bout the UFC had scheduled for July is off. Many people were anticipating the featherweight bout between Conor McGregor and Cole Miller for July the 19th in Dublin, Ireland, but that fight is off. Miller has been forced to withdraw after suffering torn ligaments in his right thumb and will be replaced by Diego Brandao to meet McGregor in that night's main event. Brandao last fought at UFC 168 in December of last year, where he was stopped by Dustin Poirier after a 3-fight win streak. McGregor has been out of action since last August when he defeated Max Holloway but suffered a knee injury during that fight. UFC featherweight champion Jose Aldo is upset over how Team Alpha Male has disrespected the camp and Renan Barão since TJ Dillashaw's bantamweight title win at UFC 173. Aldo spoke to MMAfighting.com regarding the issue, stating Barão wasn't at his best during the fight and says they are out for revenge when Aldo defends his title against Chad Mendes on August 2nd at UFC 176 in Los Angeles. And finally, Paul Daley is continuing his push for a return to the UFC, having won 5 of his last 6. Dana White noted in the pre-fight media scrum prior to the Berlin, Germany card this past weekend that his management sent him a letter that Daley has matured and calls the UFC 113 incident the biggest regret of his life. It was at that event that Daley was controlled by Josh Koscheck for 3 rounds and then sucker punched Koscheck after the final buzzer and was released by the UFC in 2010. And now John Ramdine and Robin Black step in as we are going to chat a bunch of news from today. Let's start off with the story that Cole Miller, he is out of the July 19th card against Conor McGregor, and these two had really built up quite the rivalry to make this a pretty cool main event for a fight night card that was going to be in Ireland. They were talking this fight up great, and unfortunately Cole Miller now tearing some ligaments in his thumb, and now Diego Brandao is in to fight. Is this a tougher fight for Conor McGregor?
I don't think so. You have to look at it, yes. All the build-up to this fight is what made it interesting, I think, for the casual fans' perspective. But for me, I just like, you look at Conor McGregor, and he just needs to get experience, because right now there's so much hype behind this guy. They're already talking about him challenging for the title. Well, in order for him to get a crack at that title, he has got to get the experience at the highest level. And to fight in front of his hometown crowd, I think it makes sense. Diego Brandao, you're not really sold on this guy.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't like to ever talk too negatively about fighters. These are the best athletes in the toughest sport in the world. But what this guy has shown in the area of strength has been explosiveness and drive and commitment to it. But what he's shown in the area of weakness is a little bit of mental fragility. We've seen him threatening to cut somebody's throat while under duress at the weigh-ins. We've seen him fold in later rounds. And it's his aggression that he uses to try to get in. He's kind of tailor-made for Conor McGregor to put him away in the first round. I'd love to see it go longer. I'd love to see this guy prove me wrong, but this is kind of custom-made in a place where everybody's freaking out for a young prospect with long reach and a ton of confidence. This is not a tough assignment, I don't think.
And granted, there are a lot of questions when it comes to Conor McGregor fighting upper-level competition at 145, but if there's one familiar trait with Diego Brandao is that a very fast starter, but he's faded in the third round. This is a 5-round fight, and should he get into rounds 4 or 5, and he's taking this fight on relatively short notice, I mean, there's a lot of warning signs to come with this if you're Diego Brandao, I would say.
Yeah, I think the biggest one, though, is Conor McGregor, as we mentioned, fighting in his own backyard. He is going to be so prepared to perform. Again, there was all this talk about getting a crack at the UFC title. Now fighting on home soil, I think we're going to see the best performance that we've seen from Conor McGregor. Again, that only comes to be expected when you're fighting on your home turf.
I'm going to play devil's advocate to myself here for a second. Diego Brandao, in the last couple of interviews, said and did the right things. He took responsibility for missing weight by a ton, for making excuses, for fading later in a round. And that's the start of a guy becoming mentally stronger, is going back and admitting, hey, this isn't somebody else's problem. This isn't some mistake somebody else made. I wasn't screwed. I maybe was a little frail in these areas, and I'm going to turn it around. But this is a tough one to do it in enemy territory on the other side of the world against a supremely confident guy.
Paul Daly, he is someone that is saying he has learned from his mistakes of the past. He is ready to come back to the UFC. Dana White seems that he's kind of on the fence right now. It was before an adamant no after the UFC 113 incident where he sucker punched Josh Koscheck. Now Dana White probably looking at the fact that, hey, we're doing a lot more now in international markets. Paul Daly is someone that his return would certainly have some interest for that first return back. And he's won 5 of his last 6 with that lone loss to rapper Alexander Yakovlev. Do you think that it's been enough time right now that if you're the UFC, you are able to forgive and move on here with Paul Daly, who is definitely a fun welterweight to throw into that mix? A lot of interesting fights you could make.
Yeah, I think with Dana White, yes, he gets hot-headed sometimes and, maybe doesn't put himself out the way he should put himself, but one thing that he looks at is he looks at business, and right now the UFC is so lacking in the stars department, and Paul Daly is tailor-made for the casual audience. He's got good takedown defense, and he knocks guys out in the first or second round because of his Muay Thai skills, and I think that's what fans want to see. I know Dana White knows that, and I wouldn't be surprised if he brought BJ Penn back and he brought Josh Barnett back, I would not be surprised if Paul Daly was fighting for the UFC sooner rather than later.
America does not negotiate with terrorists. I'm sorry, what was that? Oh, they did some negotiating with some terrorists? Okay, well, I guess anything is possible, right? Dana White said there's no way I'm bringing this guy back, but we know he always changes his mind. Paul Daly is one of these guys you change your mind for if you're a little flip-floppy, because he stands in the pocket, he moves his head. It's his fearlessness in his striking. There's a lot of good strikers in the UFC, but there's this very rare type of human being that's fearless in a striking exchange. Him and Nick Diaz is the best 4 minutes and 50 whatever seconds ever in fighting. I think they'll probably bring him back. Should they bring him back? That's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, and then that begins the debate. I mean, you are talking about the shark pool that is the UFC's welterweight division. And, it's one thing to have good takedown defense. It's another when you're facing some of these elite level wrestlers. That welterweight division, super deep. Let's quickly mention about Jose Aldo. This, to me, has added so much interest to this rematch with Chad Mendes. This camp war now between Team Alpha Male and Nova União as Alpha Male looks to take their lone remaining title. I think it's going to be great.
Yeah, this will be fun. Mendes can do it, man. Confidence matters. Is Aldo cracking? I mean, that's a lot of pressure. These champion guys, they show signs of cracking. Is Aldo going to use this to win, or is it going to cause a little pressure on him?
There we go. We're going to find out August 2nd, and right now we have more of Fight News Now Extra.